Hey look, somebody asked me a question. I better answer it.
Hey, this is Aaron from AaronOnAutos.com. I got another question to answer today. So this is a tough one because the people tend to throw politics into this, but don't need to. Not part of it in this case. So I did a question a little while ago about the strike going on at General Motors. It was right at the beginning, so that was the strike that was happening at that moment, had just started. And I talked about where the United Auto Workers Union had dropped the ball. So it was not a political discussion, it was a discussion about how they had screwed up their PR. Well, now the strike is over. It just ended this last week, and everybody's back to work. Cars are being made again. And then I had a question from Julie. Julie wanted to know, what did GM Auto Workers gain after this successful strike? So the point one we have to make is a strike is only successful if it means a better outcome for the workers who were involved in that strike. So if the strike worked, if they got what they wanted, it's successful. It's kind of up for debate in this case because the results are a little bit mixed. It depends a lot on who you ask, but looking just at what was accepted, what was not accepted, what the negotiations ended up with, and where they got, the UAW took a big loss, but gained a lot of small things. And I think in the end, if you want to really look at it well and look at it long term, so don't look at it as, oh, tomorrow a bunch of people don't have jobs, look at it in the longer term, General Motors still exists, therefore there are jobs. If you look at it in that way, then it was a win. The strike went very well for UAW. If you look at it in just the short-term gains, not so much. So here's kind of a rundown. There's a quick rundown of what they got, what the outcome was, what happened. So there were some pay raises gained. Those were all commensurate with raises that have happened in the past over time. Most negotiations end in a pay raise of some kind. In the interim, pay raises just don't happen. So what happens is you get a pay raise, then that's your rate until the next time they negotiate at the table. In this case, it'd be 4 years. GM employees who are part of the profit sharing no longer have a cap on their profit sharing. So up to now, there's been a cap of $12,000 per year. So a GM employee who was part of the profit sharing program could not make more than $12,000 a year. That cap is gone. They can now make however. So whatever the amount is, that's what they can get. I don't know how many employees that affected. I'm guessing it wasn't a whole lot of them. But it must have affected some because somebody bothered to negotiate it. Now the downer to that is that this year and possibly next, profit shares are going to be low. GM lost at least $3 billion over this strike. They probably lost more than that. I'm going to expect that their residual losses are going to be more like $6 billion in all. So you're going to have this $3 billion plus another 3. And I say that because it's going to take a lot of time to recover, and there's only so much production you can do. You cannot produce to make up for it without spending more money. So in the end, it's going to take time for GM to recover financially from this strike, and I see that as being a problem for them for the upcoming months, especially because the vehicles that were supposed to be being produced during this strike are 2020 models for the most part. And that's what's hitting showrooms right now. That's what's already in there, and that's what they're going to find shortages on, and that's going to affect sales. So, like I said, I expect that this is going to be fairly long-term. It's going to take a year or so to make up for it, and that means there will be much lower profit shares for GM employees the next 2, 3, 4, maybe even 6 quarters. Now, the UAW won in that it kept the Hamtramck facility open. So GM was going to close it, but they had made it clear it was a temporary closure. They were not going to close it permanently. It was going to be closed for a while. They didn't say how long. Now it's going to stay open. What GM plans to do is make electric vehicles there. I very much suspect GM already planned to do that. That was not, that was in the works anyway. The only thing here is that the employees won't necessarily lose their jobs. So the details are murky. I don't know them, but we do know that the plant is not going to close. Therefore, employees will have jobs there. The question is, what are they going to be doing? Don't know. So the biggest win for UAW workers is probably the change in how temporary workers are treated. So there's changes and very specific codifications made as to what a temporary employee is and how they become a permanent employee. This was a big sticking point for this strike, and I think it is what finally turned the crank, got things moved to the next level. So this new setup gives a clear path for temp workers to become permanent over a period of time. Generally, it's about 4 years. There's different variances depending, but it's basically 4 years. They then become full employees and then have a full employee status. Now, as I understand it, this will be retroactive, but I don't know that for sure, so correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments or somewhere. There was somebody who commented on this issue in the last video I did on this. So feel free to come right back, comment on that, but I'm pretty sure it's retroactive. So the offset here is the UAW did not convince GM to keep their Ohio plant open. GM planned to shutter that plant. They were going to close it down and walk away from it. UAW wanted to keep it open. The problem is that business-wise, this is actually a win for everybody. Because if GM just kept the plant open because they said, hey, you got to keep it open, what are they going to do with it? Right now, they have too much production capacity for what they're doing. The Ohio plant was basically going to have to go as soon as they had announced that they were no longer going to be making cars here. Because they make, all automakers, in fact, for the most part, are making vehicles close to where they sell them. Those small cars, like the Cruise and those, they are not selling in the US anymore. The production instead moved south for the most part. So most of the production in North America, as far as tooling and other things that had to do with those cars, is everything that's needed is going south because those vehicles are selling there. They are not selling here. Now, also not mentioned in any of the information, the negotiations, paperwork, anything like that, any of the releases, is the huge amount of impact that this closure, all this shutdown had on GM suppliers. Now, for every job at GM, there are 7 to 10 jobs at a supplier, so other suppliers that supply parts. So this affected truck drivers, this affected parts makers, this affected software makers, this affected a huge number of people outside of General Motors. Those people were out of a job for this entire strike, and they were not most likely they were not getting benefits. So they were not getting UAW layoff benefits, any of that. They were not getting health care paid for by GM during their strike like GM employees did. So those people have to make up for that. Those companies have to make up for that. What that means to GM and to GM employees, so what this means to those that went on strike and the General Motors company itself, is that these suppliers are far less likely to negotiate lower prices. They are much more likely to hold margins up to make up for these losses. These are companies that probably, a lot of them, paid employees to stay. So they paid employees not to show up to work, basically, and lost money while the strike went on because they need those employees, right? Shut down for a month. You don't know if it's going to be a month. It could be a week, could be 3 weeks, could be a month, could be a year. You don't know during a strike. And these companies, the smart ones, they retained their employees to the best of their ability. So that cost money. They lost money in that. They have to make that money back. There's a lot going on here, and it's much bigger than just the UAW workers and just General Motors. So overall, I would say that in the end, this is basically a win for UAW and probably a win for General Motors. I think General Motors is going to come out pretty all right with this. They're going to have a rough year or so, but they'll get over it. And for the UAW itself, this was, I think, a partial win at least when it comes to negotiations that are coming up with Ford and with FCA, Fiat Chrysler. Now, they've already penned a tentative agreement with Ford, so Ford may never even go to the table to talk to them because they may not need to. They're not up for it, I think, until next year, and it looks like they've already started the process of getting to the next level. Now, because the strike is over, attention at UAW is now back to a lot of the controversy that's been happening behind the scenes. That is going to get political and it's going to get ugly. It may or may not go well for UAW, no idea. But at least they got through this, and it looks like everybody is, in the long run, everybody's going to be happy. So that's what I got. There you go. If you have a question, you want to know something, hit me up. You can find me down in the comments below. You can go to AaronOnAutos.com. You can Facebook and Instagram and Twitter me. Just find my handle. It's all over the place. Find me. Make sure to tag me so I know it's you, so I know you're asking a question. You can email me. However you can get a hold of me, ask me that question. This question in particular, she asked me through Twitter. So there you go. If you can find me, you can ask a question, do my best to answer it. All right, talk to you again soon.